without further ado, let's go ahead and roll into it. We have a lot to talk about, as always. Hello, welcome. Thank you so much for joining another live Telgorithм Q&A, or if it's your first, welcome. We're so happy to have you. My name is Samantha Hewitt. I am a senior marketing manager here at Telgorithм, and I'm here to moderate today's session. Our goal ultimately is to provide you with real-time 10DLC support and bring you as much value as possible. So please have your questions ready. This is going to be a very interactive Q&A. So here to lead this conversation and guide us through our 10DLC questions is the Telgorithм CEO and co-founder, Aaron Alter. He is 10DLC expert, and we are so lucky to have him and have his time. Welcome, Aaron.
Likewise, Samantha, again, appreciated for putting this all together. I know these are not always easy to get going and make us all look good here, but excited to be to the next phase and next session here and to hear from the audience and talk about what's been going on in the industry. That's interesting to say the least.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you so much. So leading into the agenda, we do have some topics here. We would love to talk about them, but ultimately, like I said, we want to talk to you guys. We want to hear your questions. We want to get them answered. So if we have to veer away from the agenda, we're not worried about it. You can always reach out to us later and we can talk into any of these topics at length. So to submit your own questions, you can use the Q&A tab that's on the bottom of your Zoom. Or you can use the chat option and share it with everyone. It's completely up to you. The more information you include, such as your messaging use case or your industry or whatever will give us more color, will be better so that we can answer more accurately. And if we don't get to your question, we absolutely will. We'll be reaching out to you directly after the Q&A, so no worries there. But the first thing we want to do is we want to start with a poll. We would like to just get a feel for where everyone is at in terms of their 10DLC challenges. I mean, you joined us here today for a reason. So we would just like to know, is it registration? Obviously, it's no longer an option. We're all heading towards a deadline. Is it your campaign approval times? Is it your deliverability? Are disruptions from all the above causing you business issues? Or you not getting customer support? Or if there's something else, send it in the chat. We'd love to hear that. But we'll just sit on this for one moment and see what's going on for everybody here.
We're here trying to hear again from the broader audience and trying to speak to what's going on and hopefully lead you a path to solving some of those mission critical issues.
Campaign approval times are rough these days. Looks like that's what most people are experiencing. Okay, awesome. Thank you guys for sharing that with us. We will be talking about all three of these issues, so no problem. Okay, so Aaron, 10DLC registration is no longer optional. There's been a lot of changes this year. This is a timeline of what we've seen in just the last several months and what's coming. Why don't you take it away and tell us what really matters here?
Sure. By the way, the word optional here could be used in different ways. Really, it hasn't been optional since back in 2020, but meaning the network operators that rolled out what's called A2P 10DLC or application to person messaging or business to consumer messaging sanctioned path. They made this requirement along in partnering up with what's called the campaign registry or the reputation authority, that businesses need to go on this sanctioned path to continue to send messages to consumers. That has been in place for 3+ years now. Obviously, many in the cloud communication industry, many providers have not been forthcoming, have not been clear on this, and many times have misguided businesses on what this is and how to go about doing it to a point where essentially, I've mentioned this in the past, are basically 3 levers that the network operators have used as this is rolled out to try to, coax businesses to register over the last years. And those have primarily been adding additional pass-through fees. As when you send a text message, besides paying the platform fee that you pay to your provider, there's this thing called a carrier pass-through fee that is paid. And so they've been slowly but surely, and now it's been crazy. I think it's above a penny now for unregistered messages, if you could still even send one. And then the second one was added filtering. And this has gone on for the last 3 years, not just the last month. And again, unfortunately, this set out a path, and this ecosystem was meant to be for business to consumer communication going forward. Whereas prior, there was only person to person, there wasn't another path. And therefore, everyone must be using this path. And it's reached a point in the evolution of this process where a cutoff needs to be done. They've kind of slow rolled again the filtering, they've slow rolled the pass-through fees. And now it's a point where, okay, everyone needs to get on board, or you can't continue forward in the old way now that there is this new ecosystem. And so when we talk about these dates here, just to point out the last two here, so one of the biggest providers, messaging cloud communication providers in the industry, announced a date of July 5th of literally half cutoffs. And that means that if you're using that provider today, and actually not even that provider, if you're using a provider that's using their DCA. So I mentioned in a prior Q&A, I don't like to mention names, but in this regard here, we'll say the elephant in the room, and the name of that provider is Twilio. Twilio uses what's called an aggregator, and this is important. I know it's very technical, but I'll try to say briefly exactly why this matters. So when you send a text message to many cloud communication providers, but also Twilio is not sending the message to T-Mobile directly. There's another company on the back end known as a DCA, or a direct connect aggregator, that they are sending your message to. And that company is actually sending the message into T-Mobile or Verizon's network. And the reason it's important to understand that is because campaign approvals are not done by Twilio, they're done by their DCA. And it goes upstream to ultimately to T-Mobile's platform to get a registered or to have registered messages going through to them. But the point is that many DCAs have already cut off unregistered traffic for a few months already. And the aggregator that Twilio happens to be using is the final one, essentially, that's basically said behind the scenes, enough is enough. And T-Mobile particular, but also AT&T had pushed them for this cutover because it's already been there for 3 years. But the point here is, and again, I mentioned this in a prior session that we did, is it's not about if you need to register anymore. I mean, if you're not registered today, even if you're not completely cut off yet, it's 100% you are experiencing message deliverability issues if you are using a local, or what's called a 10DLC, a 10-digit local long code phone number to send text messages, and you are not registered. That number that you have is not allocated to a fully DCA approved campaign. I can promise you, your deliverability is definitely not anywhere near 100%. It is impacting you today, and that's 100% true. If you don't believe that, you need to check with your engineering team and pull the reports, or check with your provider because you're not being forthcoming. That is not an opinion, that's a fact. So it's not about, do I need to register even now? Not be fully cut off, but you're going to be cut off essentially now much more aggressively up until August 31st, where there will be essentially no longer a thing called an unregistered text message being sent over a local phone number. That will not exist, not only on, let's just say Twilio, on any provider. There will be no longer a thing called sending an unregistered message after August 31st. So if you have not started the process yet, you are late to that. And that's now exacerbated by, I guess, what we just did this brief survey. Everyone's worried about campaign delays, which of course that heavily matters with a looming cutover date, or potentially already disruption in traffic. And so point here number one is, it's not about if I need to register anymore. It's how do I go about registering? How do I go about registering quickly? And what are the things that I need to be aware of as I register and even after I register?
Right. We got a question while you were talking, Aaron, about campaign vetting, and this is a pretty good one. So the question is, how do vetting companies deal with duplicates? The example is, if you send a campaign registration a couple days ago, and now you need to send a new campaign registration again, what's going to happen?
I'm going to try again. So I want to preface, anytime we take Q&As, folks have very specific situations, and you should contact us and communicate with us about that specific situation. So on these Q&As, I try to get as much context as I can, but I try to answer more generally because I don't know your specific details. I can only assume what might be referred to. So I'm going to make an assumption now. So I'm going to assume the question is that you've submitted a campaign to your current cloud communication provider for campaign registration. that campaign got rejected, and you're now resubmitting this same, you want to resubmit this campaign again, hoping for a different result. I'm going to assume that's the question related to that, because that's typically where you would resubmit a campaign. And then it could also be referring to a duplicate campaign, which is a separate thing. So I'll address both of those just to make sure we cover whatever is being asked here. So number one is, if you get a rejection, obviously there should be your cloud communication provider, because the campaign registry in DC, that should provide you a very clear reason why it was rejected. No opt-in on web page for where you're collecting a phone number. You need to make sure you're going to make a change in the campaign. It might even need to be under their associated brand before you resubmit, because resubmitting the same thing over and over again, hoping for a different result, is likely not going to happen. It's probably a 1% chance that the second time around it'll get missed. So that's for category number one. For category number two, submitting multiple duplicate campaigns, what it could also be referring to is, so when you have, in the world of 10DLC, when it comes to throughputs, unlike it used to be on person to person, is one phone number would get you 60 messages in a minute. So I'm going to get 30 phone numbers, and I get, 30 times that amount. That concept by construct technically no longer exists in the ecosystem of 10DLC. And there's many reasons for that. And so therefore, different network operators allocate throughputs in certain ways. And so let's just say, when we talk about a campaign, particularly in AT&T's case, AT&T allocates a certain amount of throughput per minute per campaign, right? So let's just say, I'm going to make up a number. Let's just say they allocate, I don't know, 60, we'll stick with the same number to keep it simple, 60 messages in a minute for this campaign A. And now campaign A is for a use case for selling ice cream, right? And I don't like that I got approved for 60 messages in a minute for this campaign and also associated numbers. And I need more throughput than that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to I'm going to create a new campaign, exactly duplicate campaign, selling vanilla ice cream, in hopes that, because throughput is allocated by the campaign registry and the network operators at this campaign level, I'm now going to double my throughputs from that setup. That is the wrong way to do it. Matter of fact, you can end up with a campaign suspension on both campaigns if that's detected. And the reason is that there is a path to get higher throughputs on a given campaign, or in T-Mobile's case, at a brand level. And the way to do it is not by adding campaigns. The way to do it is by doing an external vetting, or by doing what's called a special business review. Doing a vetting that will higher the risk score for your brand, ultimately leading to a higher throughput. But that's the proper way to do it. The improper way, the proper way to create a second campaign is each individual campaign under a brand should be its own unique use case. If you have only one use case, there should only be one campaign. And the reason you're adding a campaign should not be because you want to add throughput, because there is a process to go about doing it. If you're trying to skimp the process and add a campaign for throughput reasons only, but not because you have a separate use case, that is not the proper way to do it. And that could ultimately lead down a rabbit hole you don't want to go.
Awesome. Cool. If that person that submitted the question wants to give us more context, if we didn't answer your question, please do. Otherwise, I think that those are really useful. Okay, so it actually is a great segue into our next poll. We wanted to ask if members of our audience today are experiencing brand or campaign rejections through their process of registration. We've heard a lot about this being a major pain point, so we just want to get a feel of if this has been slowing you down as well. And if so, we have a couple of tips. Well, good for the person that said no. That's that's a positive.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So
I'll actually comment that while many folks are skeptical, this process of registration is not meant to be complicated. It's not meant to harm legitimate businesses. What it's meant to do is to keep a clean ecosystem so that you can send messages at higher throughput rates and get really high deliverability. That is ultimately the goal here, and to have a dedicated path for legitimate businesses to be able to send messages. And not having a clean path, kind of what ended up happening on the P2P or person-to-person path, you don't want that to happen here. And so that's why kind of they've made these rules that they didn't actually, the reality is that most of these rules are not new, they're just being enforced. But the reason that they're validating so much is to make sure that they're keeping a clean ecosystem. I'll even add before I get, and I can see here that definitely it's affecting folks. So thanks for answering that question. But I'll even mention here that that there were folks that were in an industry that is not, we'll say, not compliant, a non-compliant industry that did try to sneak brands and campaigns into the ecosystem early last year that actually ended up causing a problem. And that's why, you know, the network operators and their partners, the aggregators, are trying to create a rigorous process as everyone literally rushes in and, you know, for this hump of getting everyone registered to make sure that this ecosystem is ultimately kept clean, because that's really its purpose, to keep it clean and keep a clean ecosystem for businesses to properly communicate with the customers. So it's not meant to make your lives more difficult. It really is not. And I know that many have perceived it and speak about it in that fashion, but I could tell you we have close relationships with all the players in this ecosystem for quite a while now, a long time. And that has not been the intent, contrary to what many think. And yes, it is frustrating. I have to get a tax ID, or I have to check this opt-in, or this website has this, or that one had that, and this has this. It is no doubt annoying, but they are trying to work on ways to streamline. I do believe that as time goes on, things will get easier once there's kind of like a flat line here a little bit. I just wanted to preface by whatever those challenges are, saying that the intent is not malicious. It really is not from what we've seen, and they're just trying to really create a clean ecosystem, if you will. And just to mention, I don't know if we want to get to it here, because I know I believe we have another slide on this, Samantha, to talk about some tips and pointers. Here we go. So some tips and pointers to make sure that, you know, you get your campaign approved the first time. And that's important for a number of reasons. One is right now there is an industry backup as far as these aggregators approving your campaign, which is ultimately what gets your numbers registered. But what you don't want to do is, you know, compound that issue by submitting a campaign, waiting 10 days or 5 weeks, only to find out you got a rejection. And then you got to figure out how to resolve the rejection. And then there's not a lot of clarity there, only to resubmit it again to wait another 5 weeks. And that is definitely not a good thing for anybody and anyone in this ecosystem. So getting it right the first time and having a partner, a cloud communication partner that can give you the right information and clear and be able to work with you is super important to make sure you get it right the first time. Also, there is now basically a $15 vetting fee for most providers today. So each time you submit a campaign, they charge a $15. This is not to hire your score. That's a separate type of vetting. But there is a $15 vetting fee just to submit your campaign, to have it reviewed by DCA, by an aggregator. And so if you get a campaign rejected and then you resubmit that very same campaign again, that would be another $15. You would end up paying $30. And each time it gets resubmitted, it's another $15, unfortunately. So you want to make sure, again, besides the timing of it, that you get it right. Now, these are general items, and I'll pick some out here. Obviously, there's nuances to every single business and setup. And so that's another reason you want to be partnered with a provider that can guide you properly on your specifics of your setup here. So don't take anything that I say to the bank here, because there could be nuances here, and there are, and sometimes there are exceptions to certain situations, and it all depends on context here. But just to highlight here, so just when you're registering a brand, a couple of things to keep in mind. So there's a very basic level check that the campaign registry does. It's very simple. They just take the tax ID that was given and the business name, and they check with the government entity to make sure that that matches. And if it matches, then you become what's called a verified brand. And if it does not match, you're not going to become verified. And if you're not verified, you can't create a campaign, hence you can't send text messages. So that is literally the only check they do at this point. They just simply check. So if it's the IRS, they want to make sure the legal company name you gave and the tax ID you gave is exactly what's on file with the IRS. If it is, it will be verified. If not, you're going to have to resubmit it. And maybe you might have to contact the registry or your provider to contact the registry to help clarify what that is. But that is one of the big reasons that you want to make sure you're doing that right. Second, it wasn't always the case, but it now is when you create a brand, you need to put a website there. A couple of points here. Number one is there must be a website, because the assumption is if this is a legitimate business, there is a separate thing called a sole prop whole separate discussion. But if you're a regular legitimate brand and company in the year 2023, you're an online-based business, basically using the cloud. There should be a valid business today has a website. And if you don't have a website and you're communicating with customers, that's a very big red flag. And so the assumption is if you're a legitimate business, you should have a legitimate website. And it's not just some holder place. It's not some landing page. It's not some page that's under construction. It's not some web page that when you go to it looks like it's spammy and there's some security issues. Those are all reasons where a campaign can be rejected by DCA, and they do reject for that. But you are required to put in a website, and that website actually should match the brand. So if you're going to create a campaign under this brand that you're going to put this website on, the website logo should match the brand that's going to be the campaign that's going to be using it. That use case should match the brand. If it's, for instance, if the brand is some shoe brand, but the website is about some hats, obviously there's two different companies. We'll make it even further outside of it. One has to do with a restaurant. The brand is for some restaurant, and then the campaign is about selling shoes, right? So there's nothing to do with each other. So the idea is the website, the name of the brand and the website that's listed under the brand should be matching the campaigns that are eventually going to be created under that brand. That is another area that DCA looks at. And if things don't match up, that can cause rejection as well. And that's on the brand side of things. And I will point out probably the biggest issue of late that we see come across the board is this call to action section. And so basically, I'll just give a brief high level, and then I'll talk a little bit about a nuance here and why some folks might be experiencing some or seeing some interesting things here. So this call to action section, that's when you create a campaign, it wasn't always there. It just used to be that you would just hit, do I collect opt-in, which is required and mandatory explicitly, and you would just hit yes, and that's it, you were good to go. But that wasn't working, and many folks were just clicking yes, just to click yes, and weren't getting opt-ins. And so over time, DCA got wind of that, and they still saw opt-out rates. So they further wanted to verify or create a process to further verify that when you say you're getting opt-ins, you truly and your brand is truly getting opt-ins. So what they did is they added this section to campaigns called call to action. Okay, you say that your brand is getting explicit opt-ins from its end users, from its customers. Well, where and exactly at what point in time and how are they getting the opt-ins? And so this field that was added is required for you on behalf of your brand to put in very specifically at which point in time and where is this explicit opt-in being obtained from that end user. Is it at the doctor's appointment? Is it through some online booking system? Is it over the phone? And so that's what that section is. So initially, that was all they looked at. They wanted to see, is this section filled out and how are you getting the opt-in? As time went on, that still wasn't good enough because folks would just put in or make up, hey, I'm just getting it over the phone. I'm just getting it verbally when they show up in person. Okay, well, what proof do you have? And then again, they started still seeing opt-outs when folks started to see that description. So it led down this path of even further, further verification. And what's happening now is, as I mentioned under the brand, is that you are now required to put up a website. So even if you say in this call to action section that, I don't know, I'm running a spa, and when folks come in, that's when I get to opt in verbally. Let's just say that's true. And you say it's not given on the website. Well, what's going to happen is DCA is going to go to the website. They go to every single brand's website, every single one, and they will look at that website. If there's any form on that website that mandatorily requires you to collect a phone number and there's no opt-in language, you're going to get a rejection. Regardless if you say that in that call to action section, we do not get opt-ins from that website at all, that is regardless, because the point is that you do have an opt-in area. There is somewhere that numbers are being collected, that's somewhere related to this brand where opt-in is not being collected. And therefore that negates the trust in your setup and situation. Well, you do have some area that I noticed that you aren't collecting this. So unless you remove that number requirement from that form, removed the number itself, so you don't have to enter it at all or make it optional, or add opt-in to that, you are likely going to get a rejection. I will give a tip. We'll call this the tip of the day for anyone wondering here as a favor to everyone joining here today. So I want to point out something here. So while today, at least for the close future, DCAs are literally manually checking every single campaign and every single website. And that's part of the reason why there is a delay. While that is true, that's regardless of any provider you're using, by the way. Everything is now manually being checked one by one by one. Here's a little tip for you. And I'm not saying to deviate from that. This is talking about being compliant. But if you were to, so they go to this website while this campaign is being vet, while it's pending. Once a campaign becomes DCA approved, that doesn't mean active, that doesn't mean registered. Those are other statuses, and we can talk about what those are. But for your campaign to become registered, there's a section called DCA approval. That stands for Direct Connect Aggregator Approval. Until that turns into yes, your campaign is not considered registered. Once your campaign is DCA yes and registered, you could technically change up everything back on that website. You could take off the form while they're reviewing your campaign. The second it becomes approved, add it right back. They will never, ever look at that website again, ever. Even if you have opt-out, if your opt-out rates start to grow, they'll just potentially suspend your campaign or ask you to approve opt-in, but they will never look at that website again. So the point is, it's a one-time deal. Set it and forget it. So if you have a way to manipulate something on that site, if you wanted, and it's still within something we'll call kosher category, and then put it back for convenience, they only look at the website one time. Once that campaign is approved, that will never be looked at ever again. And those are just some pointers here that I'll point out as of late here. Again, there's a lot of nuance here, and as things roll out, you should partner up with a partner that is well versed on the detail here to be able to help you along and make sure you get approved with minimal delay.
Awesome. Thanks for those tips. We got a question about a very industry specific campaign rejection issue. So this person said that their campaigns for loan in process messages for mortgage companies are being denied. So the question is this kind of traffic allowed on 10DLC? Not sure if you have that information today, but
That's a good question. So when it comes to loans, it has to be direct lending only. So it cannot be an affiliate, right? Sometimes they have a website that you go to and you put in your information. I think one of the famous ones is like lendingtree.com. You put in your information and then they disperse all your information to all their partner different vendors, and then one of them reaches out to you. So LendingTree in this scenario would be considered an affiliate, or non-direct lender. Any non-direct lending situation, according to T-Mobile's code of conduct, AT&T's, and I believe even CTIA, is not allowed today. Matter of fact, when you create a campaign in DCR, one of the questions that they ask you is this direct lending? And you have to actually check, yes, this is direct lending. I think it's one of the questions. I think there's 7 questions there, or 8 questions. That's one of the specific questions you have to answer. So to answer the question here is, in this ecosystem, lending and loans are allowed. Debt collection is not, but loans are, as long as it's direct lending.
okay, awesome. Thank you. All right, let's move on to our next topic. Let's see. Okay, expedited campaign vetting. So a lot of people at the beginning said that they're dealing with very painful delays with campaign vetting. Can you just talk to us a little bit about what's going on in the industry versus what Telgoritham can offer?
Yes. So I always say, in order to fix a problem or to get around one, you have to understand the root cause of the problem at its core, and then you can work on stuff. So I've already touched on it briefly here already in talking about in our previous conversation. But basically, doesn't matter who you partner with. Any cloud communication provider used for the most part is using what's called a DCA on the back. And essentially, they're a white label, right? So they're sending your message to this DCA, who's actually sending your message into T-Mobile's network. And it doesn't matter who you're using. Again, I mentioned one named Twilio, but I could name down the whole list. And you think that they are DCAs. Many times they advertise themselves as being that. They are not. And therefore, if you look at it, there's only a handful of actual DCAs that exist in North America, maybe only like 5 or 6. So you have many cloud communication providers, but really sitting behind all of them is only a handful of actual DCAs aggregators. Now, you start to think about these timelines and these cutovers that have been announced. Everyone is now rushing to register everything. And now there is this vetting process that's taking place behind the scenes. So obviously that's going to cause a backup. And until we get over the hump, let's just say after August 31st, and probably going to be a spillover after that, there's going to simply be delays in this process. Now, here is the point. So if you go, and again, we're just mentioning your name arbitrarily because they're the most famous in the industry or one of them. When you go to Twilio, Twilio has hundreds of thousands of customers, right? And hundreds of thousands of customers are trying to all register and get through at the same time. Oh, but prioritize me and prioritize me and prioritize the prioritize and prioritize and over the prioritize. And then it just doesn't work. And so you're going to experience a major backup. In Telgorithm's situation, we're not as big as Twilio yet, but that allows us some benefits, not only being a little bit smaller than a Twilio, but also the fact that we've had very close relationships with the ecosystem. You could say so have they, but we've also built technology, very unique technology that Twilio and others do not have, that makes sure that our customers are compliant. And that has built trust with the main players in the ecosystem. And just as an example of the campaign registry itself, who created the idea of a branding campaign, has only allotted 2 interviews to date, their leadership. One was to another company, it was not Twilio, and one was, you're looking at them, Telgorithm, and you can check that out, it's on our social media. And it's because we've built a trust with the Reputation Authority over many years, and we have, and what we're doing and we're trying to do for the ecosystem is really truly help people out, make sure they understand is by having a customer service and tech that supports this and supports you along the way as, you know, as this is adopted. And so because of that, it's allotted us to what I call TSA pre-screen. So while we also use a DCA, we are not a DCA yet. We have to go through the process, but because we talk to all of our customers, we understand who you are, and we have technologies that rate limit, which we'll get to maybe if we have time a little bit later. Because we have those things and they know that allows us to say, hey, we know Telgorithm, we know they check their customers, they're trustable, they talk to them before, they understand what they're doing. We built the trust, send them to the TSA pre-screen line, and it goes a little bit quicker. And so for now, our average turnaround times, if you have clean campaigns, as we discussed earlier, what clean campaigns, we'll work with you on your first few to make sure you understand what that even means, depending on your business and setup and vertical. The average approval time to get DCA approved, important, to make sure we're talking apples to apples, is about 5 to 7 business days. We can do it sometimes, we can expedite in certain situations and get it done as 2 days. Sometimes it goes longer. It can go longer. We usually don't see more than 2 weeks. The average is about 5 to 7 business days right now. What I will say is we are working on a path behind the scenes to speed that up, and where I'm confident by the end of the summer, it'll be back down to 2 days across the board. But right now it's 5 to 7 business days. And obviously, you know, many are saying that. Many are saying, well, come to us, we have the way or whatever. We fortunately have a way where we could prove that to you, right? Always take things with a grain of salt, right? Trust but verify. You should do that with not only Telegram, you do that with any vendor evenly and equally. And so we provided a way, and we have a link that we can share on how you would do this. But basically, you would create a campaign in the campaign registry without even signing up for Telgorithm. You could share it with us as a connectivity partner of the registry, and you could then monitor agnostically and independently in your own campaign registry account, which is where you should be as an ISV, not as a reseller. I don't know if we'll have time for that discussion today. You should check out our previous Q&A on that. So as a CSP, you would go and create your CSP account, nothing to do with Telgorithm. Your customer, their brand, their campaign, and share that with Telgorithm. You have a way to monitor without doing anything with Telgorithm, nothing, to see how fast we can get your campaign DCA approved. And that's a way you can independently verify and work with us that will show you in real time how fast we can truly get your campaigns DCA approved. And we strongly recommend, especially if you're in a bind or a pickle right now with any of these vendors, that you get moving on that, because we're confident we can help you in this area, just being fully transparent here versus waiting to the last second. You know, I'll point out here that I didn't mention earlier, many times of late, we get questions of, you know, we've seen these dates before. They're gonna extend the date. Yeah, I'm sure this August 31st, they're gonna extend this date. Again, as I mentioned earlier, this has been rolling out for 3+ years now. And the point is that it's not Twilio that set the date. It's the network operators that have come down on the aggregators that have set this date. And if you look at the websites now, including Twilio's, is a Q&A, it literally says, will this date be extended? I've never seen that. Been in this industry for 20 years. Never seen somebody actually say the question and literally say, no, this date will not be extended. So the point is that if whoever your current provider is, regardless if it's Twilio or not Twilio type provider, if historically you've seen delays in campaign approvals and they say, yes, this is going to get better tomorrow, I mean, and you're on a deadline right now, you may want to check out other paths, at least in parallel, to make sure you're not basically SOL, between now and August 31st. And so we'd be happy, and there are a few other good players out there, but we'd be happy to engage you and give us the opportunity to show that we can come to bat for you, and you'll be pleasantly surprised here. But we've put a demo together here that shows you how you can independently register, share campaigns with Telgorithm, and allow ourselves to prove ourselves that we can get you going and set up as far as campaign approval very, very quickly.
Awesome. That's perfect. Thank you. We got another question about campaign rejections for you.
Sure.
This one says, my campaign was rejected due to language missing in my privacy policy. So the question is, how do you help with this aspect?
Well, so let's make this very simple. When we say messaging in my privacy policy, what is it actually that they're looking for? They're looking for opt-in language, explicit opt-in language. So I'll give you an example of that. By entering your phone number in this form, you consent that you will allow X brand, this company, to contact you via text message on this phone number that you are submitting to us. So if there isn't any explicit consent there about that, and it's very, very vague, is where you could run into that problem. So you want to make sure that it's as specific as possible. By giving us this phone number here today, you consent to allow us to communicate to you via text message on the number you are submitting to us. Anything short of that, if it's very, very vague, very vague examples, then you could end up with a DCA rejection on that side. So I would say if you got that, depending on what it is, again, every specific scenario could be different, but so I'm just giving a general rule here. But the point is, it's not about the privacy policy. It's more about the opt-in and opt-in consent specific language, how visible it is to the end user when they're sharing this phone number in this form, and what the specifics of that opt-in consent is that they're looking at. And if it's not very clear, then you can end up in a situation where there's a rejection, and then there needs to be some clarification.
Awesome. I hope that was helpful. Thanks. So we're going to move on to the next slide, and we have another poll. Thanks for participating, everyone. So we're curious to know, historically or currently, what has stopped you from wanting to switch providers? We have several options here. Is it cost, your stakeholders, internal resources, because it seems to be too much development, general uncertainty, or you're currently in a contract and you're bound?
We appreciate you guys remaining with us. We know you guys have busy days, so we appreciate you taking the time here to share these details with us, because again, one of our missions here at Telgorithm is to, more than anything, is to educate, provide transparent information to the industry in general. It's a big part of what we do and what we're trying to do, so we appreciate feedback here. It allows us to continue on that path.
Yeah, that's right. Give it a couple more seconds. Thank you so much for participating. Awesome. Okay, cool. Thank you for that. Okay, so Aaron, you started to talk about this for a moment, but we just want to call out and make sure that it's very known to our audience how important it is to be registering as a CSP. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Yes. So first of all, what is it, right? Before we get to why, right? So when the A2P 10ELC ecosystem first started to be set up and rolled out by TCR in partnership with the network operators, they came up with, the idea is a checks and balance system, right? A checks and balance, so that once this is set up and rolling, if somebody, does something nefarious, it's easy to set this person aside or this traffic aside without it affecting everyone else, and without creating some crazy filtering that now ultimately exists on P2P affecting everyone else. And so the pointer is in cleaning a clean ecosystem, there needs to be some sort of hierarchy on who owns what compliance as you go up the chain from your customer to you guys, to your provider, to that DCA. And sometimes there could be 10 levels in between all of that. There's many white labels, and it's good in general to know, and should try to know where you stand and your provider stands in that ecosystem and setup, especially in regards to getting issues resolved when they do come up. But the point is when the campaign registry created registration, they created a number of different types of entities. And the two that I'll talk about is reseller and CSP. So what is it, first of all? So when I would assume most folks joining here today would be partnered with a cloud messaging API provider, because you guys have an application platform that your customers, AKA brands, log into and use to send text messages to their consumers, to their customers. And that makes you guys a CSP in this ecosystem. That is a campaign service provider. Well, what is it not? That is not a reseller. You are not reselling, well, again, I keep using the name arbitrarily, let's just say you're partnering with Telgorithm. You're not reselling Telgorithm when Telgorithm powers your application so your customers can send and receive text messages. You are not reselling Telgorithm. You have an application that you created. So that would mean that we have an application and you're white labeling and reselling that application. And that's not what's happening here. Is you're using communication plumbing or messaging APIs to power your application so that your customers can message their consumers and end users. That is what's called a campaign service provider, a messaging provider that supports multiple brands sending messages. And actually, you could see this clearly defined, fortunately, on the Reputation Authority, on campaignregistry.com. Anyone can go there, and it will clearly define what a CSP is, and it's not a reseller. And where I'm getting at here is unfortunately, many in this industry have misguided businesses and CSPs to become resellers. Hey, give us all of your customers' tax ID information, and we'll take care of everything for you on the back end. And while, not knowing that sounds like a nice thing, it's easier for me to do that, not realizing that you have no visibility in doing that. Also, you have no ownership. You have no ownership when you give a tax ID and a business name to a messaging provider and they register for you. Every brand has a brand ID, and every campaign has a campaign ID that gets generated and associated with it. And that gets tied to the CSP. There is no connection with a reseller in that regard. So if by default they're registering as a reseller, that means nothing. So if you ever wanted to switch providers, or if you ever wanted to multi-thread, use multiple providers at one time, you simply would not have the ability to do that by going to your provider and having them register everything for you. Not only that, there's also lack of transparency. One of the things I did not mention earlier here in regards to campaign registration, and actually it's another tip I'll give you guys for today, a second one I'll add in here, is many folks have said that, hey, I shared this campaign 3 months ago with X company and it still hasn't been approved yet. So I just want to point out something to everyone that's joined here today. Because ultimately, really, you should be going directly to the registry, which is what we're expounding upon here. But the point is, anybody that's ever submitted any branding campaign through any provider can always send an email to support@campaignregistry.com. That means you're sending an email directly to the campaign registry saying, hey, I submitted this brand name with this tax ID and this information to my provider X amount of week ago, and they're telling me it's either pending or rejected. Can you validate and verify for me why that is? And what we've seen recently in recommending many customers to do that, the TCR gets back pretty quick and says, we never heard of you guys. You should go back to your current provider and make sure they submitted it. And we've had people literally freak out with hundreds of campaigns sitting there that were in somehow either never got submitted or were in some queue, and that provider never even submitted the campaign to the registry. And that could be the case for anyone that's on this webinar today or Q&A today. And I would strongly suggest that so you don't have any transparency. You have no idea once you submit your customer's tax ID or even a vetting, you're paying all this money, $4 per brand, $1.50 for a low volume campaign, $40 for vettings and external vettings, and extended vettings, and you're paying all this money. You have zero visibility, as to what is happening behind the scenes. And as an actual CSP, a as defined by the campaign registry, the only reputation authority that was chosen, you need to go directly to the campaign registry yourself, register there. I believe they charge a $200 one-time fee to do that. That's to them. That's one time. That's low risk for any business, $200. You get access to their setup. You have a direct relationship with the reputation authority. You create your brands in there. You do their vettings in your TCR CSP account, create the campaigns, and then you need to find a connectivity partner that will support you as a CSP. And if some partner will not, then they are simply not the right provider for you. And that is very important, again, because every time you take a branding campaign and give tax ID information to another vendor that's not the reputation authority, you're digging yourself in a hole. You have lack of transparency, and you're digging yourself in with that vendor. And because you'll have to peel yourself out at some day if you ever wanted a multi-thread or it doesn't work out, on top of having to integrate somewhere else, on top of having to, port numbers somewhere else, you're going to have to deal with that. And there's going to be costs involved with that as well. So super important to make sure that, again, defining what a CSP is. And if you are a CSP, or I know I mentioned Twilio's terms, an ISV equals CSP, not a reseller. You need to make sure you're registering in that way, so you have the most transparency. You could see what's going on behind the scenes. You have the relationship with the reputation authority, and you're agnostic of any vendor, so you have that control. I mean, I wouldn't want to understand any other business that would not want that, other than they're not aware that they should be doing that. But I would strongly recommend anyone that has joined today to go ahead and do that, regardless. That's nothing to do with us or any provider. Do your own self a favor and go over there and register the proper way as a CSP.
Well said. That's perfect. We have another question. I'm going to test your error code memory here. So this person asks, I believe this is how the question is phrased. We have been running an approved campaign, but randomly throughout the day receive error 45 carrier rejection responses. Do you have any info on this, or is this something we should follow up with after?
We should follow up with it after, because that error 45 is likely cloud communication provider or vendor specific. It's not an SMPP code. SMPP codes are, you wouldn't be, well, it could be let me say, it could be an SMPP code. I don't know that is. I don't know every SMPP code by heart, but it sounds to me like it's a code that your current cloud communication provider has sent you. What was the error again?
It's error 45. It says
The
carrier
description.
Carrier rejection responses.
Carrier rejection responses.
Mhm.
So it's a very vague term, separate conversation. I'll just say, just to plug Telgorhythm, we don't provide any general errors. We've taken a lot of time in deciphering every single error, and we provide a very clear detail in our errors. Like, cell phone was turned off, try again in 30 minutes. That comes back to you and what we set up for that reason. So there is no vagueness there on codes, but you would have to give us more specifics there as to, or find out from your current provider what they specifically, because that sounds like a very, unfortunately, a very vague description there. So it's hard to know the context and what that's referring to. It could be a number of different things.
Okay, so we'll definitely follow up after. And then we also got a request for links to docs on how to become a CSP. So I think generally we can just say that we can definitely share collateral and guidance on how to become a CSP with anyone who's interested. Right. So feel free to reach out.
I do want to point out one thing here before, and I know
Sure.
we're almost up on time here. We are not a plugin or an add-on to another cloud communication provider stack. We provide a lot of education, but ultimately, I just want to make it clear, Telgorhythm is a cloud communication messaging provider, no different than a Twilio. We just are experts in this area, and this is our niche area that we are very good at, and where our tech is, and where we provide a lot of guidance and information. We don't charge for any of that, not even with our service. We don't have a professional services we charge for, but we're just doing this out of goodness, because we were customers prior to founding Telgorhythm of some of these cloud communication providers and didn't get the right information. And so it's a lot of what we do is provide that, because it means a lot to us. But ultimately, we're not a consulting authority, although we are very consultative in our approach and our customer service with our customers. I just want to make that clear.
Yeah, that's great. It's good clarification. Okay, so on to the next 10DLC predictions, it's not quite what it sounds like. We just want to talk about what we think you will be worried about or thinking about, or what you should be thinking about after this registration dust settles, because that is where all the energy and attention is going for the most part right now. So, Aaron, can you kind of take us through?
Yes. So there's a lot of areas to go in this when we talk about predictions of what's going to happen. And we are privy to know some information on our end. But one of the things that I'll mention here also is, so a lot of what we discussed today, and I think the closest to where I want to go with this question is actually piggybacking where I think the prior question of that error 45 might be referring to. I'm just not sure. I need more detail, but where I think that was going. And that's what I want to address here now. So everyone is very focused on this thing called registration and registrating and cutoffs and timelines. How do I get registered right now? Unfortunately, what's being missed is, and there's a big misconception about this, is that once I'm registered, everything is good to go. There's no, that's it, I'm done. Shoo, I hit the deadline, I'm good to go. I am here to say, unfortunately, the answer to that is, unfortunately, that is not true. And what I mean by this is you are entering a new ecosystem that operates in a different way than the old ecosystem did. And so very simply put, what I mean by that is when you register, I think I touched on this a little bit earlier, what is it you're actually registering and purchasing for? Of course, you want to keep a clean ecosystem, but actually what you're buying is throughputs, right? There's a low volume campaign, a high dedicated campaign. There's different external vettings to higher your risk score to what? To get you more volumes. Ultimately, you are paying for volumes. But here's the kicker. Not every network operator is alike when it comes to volume. So for instance, T-Mobile, as an example, gives a daily limit per brand. So one of whoever's joined us today, one of your customers as a CSP or as an ISV, one of your customers is what's called a brand. And their use cases are called campaigns. Now, in T-Mobile's case, what T-Mobile does, it allocates a certain overall daily limit for all of the campaigns that are set up under this brand. So you could have 5 campaigns, but they're all going to share the same limit under this brand when it comes to T-Mobile. T-Mobile's lowest limit is 2,000 messages a day. So here's the question to ask yourself. Wait, it's a daily limit from T-Mobile for at this brand level for all of the campaigns here. Now, this daily limit, let's just say, starts at 2,000 messages a day. Well, what happens if I send, or my customer sends 2,001 messages? There's a lot of campaigns there. They're pretty busy. Not going to be very difficult to hit 2,001 messages in a day. Well, I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. That 2,001st message and beyond until the following day will drop. You will be charged for that message, and you'll be charged a carrier pass-through fee for that message. So get this, you spent all this time and headache and all this money and waiting all these weeks to figuring out opt-ins, opt-outs, websites, brand registrations, call to actions, all this stuff. And all of a sudden you tell your customer you're registered, and then a day later, all of a sudden you have messages drop on the floor. Imagine how livid they would be when you find out and paid all this money to do that as well. And so the point here is, and what's pretty interesting about the industry in general in this regard, it's kind of being left alone for now, and I have no idea why that is at all. But the point is somebody needs to manage this for you. And so every vendor today in existence, pretty much, you can go to their website and just simply Google exceeded my T-Mobile daily limit. They will have an error. Means that they're expecting you, meaning it could happen, they're expecting that it can happen. So everyone thinks that, oh, my provider is managing that for me. And the answer, unfortunately, is industry-wide, pretty much no one is doing that. And Telgorithm knew this upfront and knew what 10DLC was about upfront. And we thought everyone was going to. We created a technology that does just that. So speaking of T-Mobile as an example, we actually found that, hey, wait, there's a daily limit. Well, when does this day start? Is it a rolling 24-hour period? Does timer reset at midnight? If it's midnight, what time zone is it in? Does it take daylight savings time into account? Or, Metro PCS is a subsidiary of T-Mobile. So when I send a message to a Metro PCS end user, is that considered in the daily limit? I mean, why is no one asking any of these questions? Because what good is 2,000 messages a day if no one is tracking it? And that's what you're paying for fundamentally. This is not like a nice thing. This is fundamentally, when you purchase a brand and its campaign, you're purchasing throughputs and you're getting approvals from the network operators. Now, T-Mobile has a per campaign limit. Verizon has a per number per minute limit, and US Cellular. And as you go, each one has its own limit. And if you are not tracking this, because you assume your messaging provider is, who is likely not, and you're not tracking it, you're going to run into these problems fairly quickly after going through all this stress and all this heartache and all this money to register and not have that. And so early on, we built that. We found that information out. We have a relationship with the network operators, with TCR. We found out exactly what's the time limit, when does it reset, and when you elect, in Telgorithm's case, us as a connectivity partner, we get this information from your brand. We load that into our database and we proactively track this and monitor this on your behalf on the fly. Before you even send a text message, we look up who's the network operator and a subsidiary that you are about to send the message to, calculate out this particular brand and all its associated campaigns. How many messages did it send midnight to midnight Pacific time, including daylight savings time? And then when you reach 50% of that limit, we send you an alert that informs you, hey, this customer of yours is at 50% of their limit. Maybe reach out to them to add some vetting to higher their score. 75%, another alert. If you even reach 100%, we actually queue your message up and send you another alert to fix it so it doesn't drop. And then we resend it for you. We hold it. We send it to you at midnight Pacific time. When they reset it, we send it for you. Now, not everyone wants it to be sent at midnight Pacific time. So we added time routing into that allows you to say, hey, wait, I know it's reset now, wait till 9 a.m. instead, or maybe it doesn't make sense to send this message altogether. We'll give you the ability to resend the message. And not only do we do this for T-Mobile, we do this at a per campaign level for AT&T, per number for Verizon, and so on and so forth. As I mentioned earlier, we thought everyone was doing this. Little do we find out, you look at their websites, no one is doing this. I would say here, as you look forward in registration, this new ecosystem, what is it you're actually registering for? And are you going to have success with the vendor you're choosing to partner with once you register? The last thing you would want is you spent all this time, money, and effort, and all of a sudden, 2 days later, have disruptions on this side of things, which has been causing quite some issues in the industry. And so we've built technology that is now patent pending that manages all of that for you, so you don't have to deal with engineering that complexity. And this is not, we don't feel that's a nicety. That is fundamental to the success for you and your customers as you navigate A2P 10 DLC.
Awesome. That was the perfect way to wrap up this Q&A. We are just about at time. Huge thank you to everyone who joined us today and who asked questions, who took our polls. We really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun. And huge thank you, as always, to you, Aaron. You're so knowledgeable. We are all very grateful for you sharing everything that you've shared, all those nice tips. We will be sharing this recording out as soon as it's available. So look for that in your inbox. And please reach out to us if you have any more questions. We'd love to continue the conversation.
Yes, please reach out. We want to hear from you.
Awesome. There is a short survey at the very end, so if you'd like to stay and answer that, we'd be appreciative. Otherwise, have an amazing day, and thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.